Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and this is the second video in a series about the rules of Arkham Horror the card game. I know that the rules reference and FAQ are large documents that are difficult to wade through, so I'm going to give you some highlights of things you need to know when playing the game. Today, we're going to talk all about Survivor cards and how their timing and interaction with the game can drive you absolutely crazy. But once you get a hang of it, you'll start to see that there are all sorts of powerful things you can do. But really, this video is all about timing points during skill tests. I'm sure you've seen cards with things like if you succeed, and after you fail by 2 or less, and after you succeed, and when you would fail, and have gotten thoroughly confused. When are these things supposed to trigger? I keep having to look these things up myself because truly the answers are not intuitive at all. What we'll do in this video is talk through a few of the major rules and then answer a few big questions about card interactions you have probably asked yourself at least once. Okay, let's first have a look at the skill test timing framework, which is found in the rules reference. If this is the first time that you've ever seen this, don't feel bad. Most players do not look at this, but the timing is really important for various interactions between cards, so I'll walk you through it. It's important to note that each card has a specific trigger that indicates when it is played or resolved. For cards that are played or resolved during a skill test, its timing point matches up with one of the steps over here on the right. We'll talk about a few of these steps in more detail shortly, but for now, let's just give some examples of Survivor cards, although of course these timing points show up on cards from every class. First, Cornered. It has a free triggered ability icon on it, so indeed the timing point at which we can discard a card from our hand to get +2 skill value for this test is during either of the free triggered ability windows blanking when you can commit cards to skill tests, so we'll place it over there. Note that discarding a card to Cornered is not the same thing as committing a card. Cards that are committed during skill tests are only placed into the discard pile during step 8, all the way at the bottom of our list. Next, let's read Butterfly Effect, an event that says we can play it when a chaos token with a symbol is revealed. So that means it can be played here during step 3, when I pull a token out of the bag, but before anything else happens. The card itself allows me to commit a card or return a card I've committed outside of the normal window for doing so. Next, we have Look What I Found. It says, play after you fail a skill test by 2 or less. This is strange, and we'll talk about it more later, but the rules say that you can only play it as soon as you've determined success or failure, which is step 6. One last thing for now, and it's a skill card. This one says, if this skill test is successful. You'd think that the timing point would be the same as Look What I Found, but actually the rules say that skilled cards like this one add an effect to the original skill test. That is, it gets resolved in step 7, apply skill test results. As I mentioned earlier, step 8 is when you clean up everything from the test, like putting the token back into the bag and discarding skills you committed to the test, as well as an event card that you played that initiated the test in the first place. Okay, those are some examples. Now let's go ahead and talk about 4 principles that should clear up the major questions you already have. If you can keep these principles in mind, you should be able to interpret any card interactions. First, results of skill tests are always step 7. I'm going to leave the timing framework over here on the right so you can refer to it, but I'll take away the labels from time to time. Alright, what counts? Well, effects of the test itself. If you're using Fire Axe during an attack, dealing the standard damage always happens during step 7. This is also the timing point where Fire Axe checks your resource pool. If you don't have any resources by this point, you deal +1 damage. The free triggered ability there at the bottom can be used during either of the 2 player windows before and after committing cards, but not afterwards. Another result of the skill test is anything that says if you succeed, or if this skill test is successful, or something like that on an event or a skill card. So, if you play Resourceful, you can return a Survivor card into your hand from the discard pile, but importantly, it needs to be in the discard pile by the time step 7 rolls around. Naturally, all of the if you fail effects on events or skills trigger here too. If you commit Take Heart to a skill test and you fail it, don't draw your cards and gain your resources until step 7. That will be important in a little bit. Finally, retaliate, alert, and haunted are also results of skill tests, but they all happen after all of the other Step 7 effects. So, if you fail an attack against the Wizard of the Order, if you committed Take Heart to it, you can draw some cards and maybe draw something that will help out with that attack, like dodge. Let's look at the relevant rules here. First, this is the part about Step 7 from the FAQ, and next are the rules about retaliate. The rules for alert and haunted are worded identically. Okay, Principle 2. Reactions, events, and force abilities are Step 6. This one I think is the most unintuitive for most players. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the FAQ that says it explicitly in case you don't believe me. It's a continuation of the rule about Step 7 that we just saw. These abilities don't trigger during Step 7, they trigger during Step 6 instead. What throws me off is that word after, but that word is a red herring. Here's how I'd like to explain it. The window for using these abilities opens up immediately upon determining success or failure, and that's Step 6. The timing window isn't after the skill test is over, it's immediately when you know you've passed or failed. So you have to use the ability then, or you lose the opportunity. Okay, which cards are like this? Any events or cards with a reaction trigger that say after you succeed. Scavenging is one of them, so make sure you pull that item card back before you move on to Step 7. Another one is Belly of the Beast. The strange part here is that you actually play this card and discover the clue before the enemy is actually exhausted from your evasion. This is different from Breaking and Entering, a rogue card that allows you to take the clue and evade the enemy in whatever order you want, but all during Step 7. If you're starting to get a little angry at the rules, well, you're not alone. Similarly to before, there's also a whole host of after you fail events and reactions. Rabbit's Foot is one of them. And so is Look What I Found, which we saw before. These two have the exact same timing window, so you could draw Look What I Found off of Rabbit's Foot and then immediately play it. That's good, right? Here's a not so good one. Forced effects on encounter cards with the same after you fail or succeed language also happen during Step 6, but they always happen before any of your own player card effects. So if you fail an investigate check at the art gallery, you'll lose 2 resources before you get a chance to play Look What I Found, which, if you recall, costs you 2 resources. Here's one more forced effect based on succeeding. Principle number 3 is all about relative timing. When you have the same triggering condition, cards that say when happen before cards that say if, and after is last. This is a bit unusual in the cards we're looking at today, since pretty much all of the Step 6 cards are templated as after, and the Step 7 cards are templated as if, so they don't share the same timing window to begin with, but it's worth keeping in mind. What you should know is that if 2 effects have the exact same timing, like Rabbit's Foot and Look What I Found, you get to decide the order, except for forced effects, which always come first. There's a few places in the rules that reference all of this, but I won't dwell on it. Okay, last major principle before we look at some examples. Skill cards are constant effects. One theme that some Survivor cards have is to return skill cards that have been committed to a test back to their hand. For the most part, the text and icons on these cards are only counted while they are committed. When cards are out of play, like in your hand, they have no effect on the game. There are a few exceptions that we'll talk about more when we get to Silas Marsh, but spoilers, the rules are a little bit more clear in the FAQ about Silas and Daring. Okay, we've made it through the rules. Now let's clear up some lingering questions you might have about some Survivor nonsense. First off, what does Granny Orne do? Her ability says, when an investigator at your location would fail a skill test. So let's look at when that would trigger. It's here at the beginning of Step 6. Now you fail by either 1 more or 1 less. You still fail though, so why would you want to do this? Well, take a look at Rotting Remains. If you fail, you take 1 horror for each point you fail by. Let's say I fail by 1. Granny lets me fail by 0 instead, and I won't take any horror. That's pretty great. She can even help out on an auto fail. Instead of failing by 3, I could use her ability and only fail by 2. Now, wanting to fail by 1 more is a little unusual, but maybe you could use it to trigger the horror heal off of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Now, what's the difference between Granny Orne level 0 and Granny Orne level 3? The triggering window is exactly the same, but now you get to modify your skill value and recalculate whether or not you pass the test. This is essentially the same ability as the card Lucky. In sum, Granny Orne 3 can cause you to pass, while Granny Orne 0 mitigates failure. Alright, question number 2. How much can I cheese Take Heart? Let's look at its interaction with Try and Try Again, which says, after a skill test has failed, if a skill card you own is committed, exhaust this to return that skill card to your hand. Okay, so can I get the cards and resources off of Take Heart and get it back into my hand to profit off of it next turn? The answer is no. Let's look at the timing windows. Try and Try Again is one of these after you fail reaction triggers, which has to happen during step 6. Drawing cards and gaining resources with Take Heart happens during step 7, so it's too late to return it to your hand with Try and Try Again. Well, you could return it to your hand during step 6, but then you don't get any of the effects, so probably don't do that. So Try and Try Again is a no-go, but let's look at Grizzly Totem, level 3. It too has a reaction trigger, but it has some different timing windows. The reaction ability actually kicks off up here during step 2, and the effect at the bottom is worded as if that skill test fails, so that happens during step 7. And as we already know, Take Heart is also step 7. Since we can order these skill test effects however we want, you can indeed draw the cards and resources off of Take Heart and then return it to your hand with Grizzly Totem. Let's do another one. Here's Oops. Can I draw it with Take Heart and immediately play it? Well, the card has that after you fail a skill test wording. Again, that is step 6. And Take Heart is step 7, so no, you can't. Oops. Okay, question number 3. When can I return cards from the discard pile? The answer is, it depends. It depends on when things enter the discard pile and when other cards can grab them. Every card is a little different. Let's look at Scavenging and Ice Pick first. Scavenging we've seen before, and it's a step 6 effect. Ice Pick unfortunately discards itself during step 7, as it's a if you succeed effect. You could, however, scavenge a second Ice Pick that was already in the discard pile. How about William York? Everyone wants to know whether or not his ability can pull back a baseball bat that just got discarded when you drew a skull or autofail symbol. Let's check it out. Baseball bat discards itself after the attack resolves, and this is going to be at the end of the whole skill test, that is, after step 8. York's ability, meanwhile, is after you defeat an enemy, which is step 7, after you've placed the last damage token on an enemy that caused it to be defeated. So York's ability happens too late. One more, and that's the skill card Resourceful. When do you get to pull a card out of the discard pile? Well, it's a step 7 effect, so you get to bring something back then. What could you bring back? Anything in the discard pile at that point, of course. Resolved events like Lucky or Shed a Light are fair game. So are Ice Picks and Old Keyrings used that turn because you can order their self-discards first. And anything you discarded with Cornered is good too. Basically anything that got discarded from the beginning of the test until the end of step 7. What can't you do? Other skills that were committed to this test, because those aren't discarded until step 8. Okay, more on skill cards then. Let's tackle Silas Marsh. His ability says that after you reveal a Chaos token, you can return a skill card you've committed, so that happens during step 3. If you use this ability, then that skill does not contribute any icons or effects during steps 4 through 7. It's almost as if you had never committed the card. A simple example, if you commit Overpower, draw a +1 token and realize you don't need the 2 combat icons anymore to pass the test, you can bring Overpower back to your hand. But that means you won't get to draw the card from passing the test either. That said, some skills create lasting effects or resolve before Silas's reaction ability, so bringing those cards back to your hand won't prevent those effects from happening. Let's take a look at a few of those cards. Remember, you commit cards during step 2 and bring back the skill card during step 3. Level 0 Defiance works even if you bring it back because it creates a lasting effect before step 3 kicks in. You'll lose the 1 wild icon if you bring it back, but you'll still ignore the token's effects and modifier. Daring was what the FAQ was all about from earlier. Essentially, bringing the card back will not remove Retaliate or Alert because those are lasting effects, but it will remove the part about drawing a card because that would happen after you've picked the card up. Unrelenting is a great card in Silas exactly because the card draw here happens in step 2. You can pick Unrelenting back up and not have to give the cards back. Finally, Nautical Prowess, which is a card from Silas's novella, lets you draw a card during step 3. You can still pick up Nautical Prowess back up because the if timing on the card happens before the after timing for Silas's ability. One last thing about Silas, his signature cards, Sea Change Harpoon and Silas's Net both get you a bonus if you commit a card while using the asset. Even if you return a card using Silas's ability, you did still commit a card, so you'll get the extra damage or the second evasion. Okay, enough about Silas. What should I know about Lucky? I've gone over this in another video already, but it's worth restating here. You play Lucky when you would fail a skill test, so that's the beginning of step 6. Since you get +2 to your skill value, you kind of go back to step 5 to recalculate your modified skill value. If this causes you to pass, then great, you don't fail anymore, and you pass. A few other things though, if you draw the auto fail, your skill value is set to 0. Lucky does not modify it. And you can play Lucky even if you still fail, because it might get you in range to play Look What I Found, or play another copy of Lucky to pass. Lastly, your modified skill value is reevaluated before converting negative skill values to 0. If you don't remember this rule, your skill value can go below 0, but after calculating all modifiers, any negative skill values are set to 0. Lucky is another instance of an active modifier, so it can only help so much. I'm putting the long-winded rules explanation up here if you want to read it, but if you want to hear me talk more about negative skill values, go watch my previous video on rules. Okay, last one. What action am I on with Quick Learner? Hey, that's the name of the channel. Anyways, Quick Learner counts the actions taken in order. The source of the action doesn't matter. So you'll get +1 difficulty for your first action, and -1 difficulty for your third, fourth, etc. When some other ability causes you to gain additional actions, it's always the first eligible action. If you have Leo DeLuca in play, for example, the first action you take each turn is always the Leo action. In practice, though, this rarely matters, and Quick Learner really doesn't care. However, fast reactions and free triggered abilities are not actions, but they can have skill tests, so that's why Quick Learner says things like during or before, and during or after. Here's the most common question: does the change in difficulty affect a test I take with Live and Learn? Well, according to this ruling that I found on ArkhamDB, skill tests and actions are coterminous. So if I take a test with +1 difficulty for my first action and fail, I can play Live and Learn and attempt the test again. However, the second attempt will not have that +1 difficulty anymore because that first action is over. That is, Live and Learn skill test is between actions. Alright, I think I get it. Can you give me a maximally complicated example? Oh no, do you really want to see all of these interactions at once? Are you sure? Well, okay. This might not be the most maximally complicated case because I'm not going to mess around much with the step 6/step 7 nonsense, but it's going to be really cool. Let's see Stella Clark discover 8 clues in one turn. First, if you're not familiar with Stella Clark, she can take an extra action during her turn as long as she's failed a skill test that round. She's the premier survivor who cares about benefiting from failing. So let's give her a couple of copies of Quick Learner, because you can have 2. And how about a copy of Old Keyring 3, because that card is busted. And then how about Scavenging level 2 and a Rabbit's Foot for good measure? Yeah. Okay, here we go. 8 clues on a 4 shroud location. Action 1. Stella will try to investigate. Difficulty is 6 because of the 2 Quick Learners, but let's use the Old Keyring to reduce it down to 4. So we're going 2 to 4, and we draw a 0 token. That's a failure. So during step 6, we'll exhaust Rabbit's Foot to draw Look What I Found and play it, since we're still in step 6. We've failed by 2, and that allows us to discover 2 clues. The skill test is now over, and so we can play Live and Learn from our hand, and we'll attempt the test again, this time at 4 to 2, since Live and Learn gives us the +2. We draw a -1 token, and that's a success. One more clue, and the keyring discards itself. We're now on to action 2, which is an additional one because of Stella's ability, so we'll investigate again. The difficulty is 4 again, because Quick Learner doesn't do anything and we don't have the Old Keyring in play anymore. So let's try to pass by committing an unexpected courage. That makes it 4 to 4. We'll draw the -1 again, and that would be a failure, except we'll play Lucky level 3 and get +3 skill value. That means we actually succeed by 2. So we'll trigger Scavenging level 2 and immediately play that Old Keyring again. Here it is. Oh, and we still need to resolve step 7, so let's discover that clue. We can't return Unexpected Courage level 2 because we did pass the test. For action 3, our pair of Quick Learners kick in. By using Old Keyring 3, we reduce the difficulty all the way down to 0. All we need to do is draw a token and hope it's not the auto-fail. It's a -4. Even though we were testing 2 to 0, the -4 still lets us pass because our negative modified skill value is converted to 0, and that's a pass. So we discover 2 clues and remove a key. On our 4th action, we'll do exactly the same thing as before. A -3 doesn't cause us to fail, and we'll grab the last 2 clues, and there you have it. 1 turn, 8 clues for Stella Clark. And that will bring us to the end of this video. I hope you've learned something about the time points in Arkham Horror the card game. I hope I didn't make any mistakes, but with this complicated of a system, I very well might have. So check down in the comments below for someone correcting me. More likely, you'll read a lot of comments about people frustrated about how confusing the rules are, and I agree. But I think that several things in the game are balanced around the rules working in this way, so you might as well play it correctly if you know how it's supposed to go. Thanks for watching, and stick around for more Arkham Horror content here on the channel.